All right, joining me now for the first time in forever, while I try to get some schoolwork done at the same time, is CA Conservative. Welcome.
How you doing?
And I see you've changed your name on Zoom.
Pretty sure it's always been that.
It's always been that okay. What do I know? Um, so man, a lot has happened in Ukraine in just the past month. I know you and I were talking about, you said you didn't want to do one of these things because it was so depressing. Well, man, how does a month change things?
Quiet.
So, just to review basically what's happened, Ukraine has basically launched a massive counteroffensive. One at Kherson, which is ongoing, and one at Kharkiv, which has had massive success. They have driven the Russians pretty much out of the oblast and across the river. And the Ukrainians, I believe, are now across that river and are encircling the Donbass, I believe, from the north.
Well, the city of Lemon from the north, which they're going, that city should have been, the Russians should have withdrawn from that weeks ago, but they've almost certainly been ordered to stay regardless of their overall position. And they're about to be punished for that position.
Yeah, and so taking Lyman would potentially be able to help them take Severodonetsk, right?
I mean, that would be, the city right across the river from it would be a more viable target. The
Right.
city was very difficult for the Russians to take. It would be very difficult to cross the river and take it again,
Right.
without an overall collapse in the region. But overall, once they do so, the Russians will be out of easy places to put, their million conscripted fools.
Hmm.
Um, so,
And
I mean, what a joke.
yeah, and as the Ukrainians continue to make advances in the north, I'm curious to know if they might actually try to make an attack at Zaporizhia in order to split the Russians in half.
That would probably be my next move. They're running out of easy targets in the east, but once they destroy these forces in Lemon, the Russians won't have any easy, mobile units left.
Yeah.
Um,
What struck me is how Russia has completely proven incapable of taking Kramatorsk, Bakhmut, or what was the name of the Slaviansk.
I've seen some very gruesome videos from the one that starts with a B, um, of the continued Wagner attacks against it that have all
Oh,
failed.
Wagner's still there?
That's one of their main positions is trying to take it.
Wow.
Apparently, they continue human wave attacks against dug-in Ukrainian positions unsuccessfully.
And so at the same time that Ukraine is making these advances, Russia has held these shamarenda in.
There have been no referendums. I don't know why people keep talking about them. They didn't happen. There
Okay.
were no referendums.
Well, the reason why I bring up the
Some random
shamarenda,
people put some paper together and decided to throw it in a box. That doesn't count for anything. It shouldn't,
hence the name shamarenda.
that Reuters headline was a disgusting joke. An unsurprising one at that.
There's a reason why I posted that. I should also break some news, by the way, for those who haven't heard. I also conducted some independence referenda in Dagestan, North Ossetia, Tatarstan, and Kaliningrad. I believe Dagestan voted 99% for independence. North Ossetia voted 98%. Tatarstan also voted 98%, and Kaliningrad voted 97%.
Very impressive result across the board.
Yeah, and if for those who are wondering, like, is that real? And they're just as real as what happened in Ukraine. And But basically, the big news that happened in just I think the last couple hours is Russia's not going is blinking. They blinked. They're not going to annex the territories.
I mean, they can do whatever they want. Their official position doesn't matter. And they should
Yeah,
be treated no differently than the supposed annexations in, Northeast France in the 1940s. Um, you
and
know,
and there was also an attack on NATO infrastructure, Nord Stream, and in I don't know if it was in NATO territory,
it was in
but
international waters, but I've been waiting for somebody to blow that pipeline up for a long time. I'm glad the Russians finally did it.
yeah, and so I'm wondering, like, does Ukraine now finally get? I mean, not Ukraine. Does the EU finally grow the pair it needs to send Ukraine what it needs?
I mean,
Final.
I've heard another 18 HIMARS are on the way, so
Yep. That's more than doubling the current number. And you and I have actually had a chat about this. Should the West open up the immigration system and drain Russia of its manpower?
absolutely not. I'm fully supportive of all measures to close the borders outright, and I'd be sending them all back. The drain that they will cause on Russia's supply situation, on their internal public order, vastly outweighs any gains of draining them, so to speak, with a bunch of, people who were fully in support of the war before they had to go actually fight it. I have absolutely no sympathy for those being drafted, and I wish them a quick end to their mobilized existence.
And their actual existence.
They're free to surrender.
Yep. I mean, so it's not a full mobilization. Apparently, still
It
it's
may as
less.
well be one. They're lying about the scope of it. It's
It's not going to be
absolutely.
300,000.
Oh no, it'll be closer to 2 million probably by the end.
Oh
They're
wow.
emptying whole villages to ship them west. I mean, they're rounding up the old men, you
They're
know.
drafting prisoners.
Well, they've been drafting prisoners for a long time. But I mean, when you have people that are deaf, that are blind, that have serious conditions, that can barely walk, that have no military experience, um, it's a joke. It's an absolute farce, and I don't know what they intend to do with all this bunch. They barely have the equipment for them. They're dressing them in World War II era uniforms with equipment that's 50 years old that barely functions. Like, what an absolute joke across the board.
Yeah, it
You
reminds
know,
me of that meme. Have you heard of the "is potato" meme?
only vaguely.
Yeah, I mean that's basically the state of Russia's army, right? Is potato.
Oh, of course. But the fundamental problem is that these men, I mean, we've already seen mobilized troops captured at the front. They're not going to be able to do anything. They're making whole units of infantry only, units. This
Uh,
is, 2022. That's an absolute joke. We're seeing, and even with regards to their other branches, I mean, we're seeing their Air Force finally appeared, after the last months of not doing anything aside from shooting missiles from beyond, the border, and they lost 4 planes in one day.
right.
You know,
Um, yeah, no, Russia's military. I think this is a before and after moment in terms of how we view the threat of Russia. But one of
well,
the
that
wor
was the first week of the war.
yeah, but what I was really worried about was after the non-existent after those pieces of paper were blank pieces of paper were counted on camera. Um, I was worried that Russia would either they would follow through on their nuclear weapons threat, or Ukraine would blink, realize they weren't bluffing, and actually pull back.
I could still use them.
Yeah, I mean that's the worry I have is that is not that like that Russia uses them, but that Ukraine could blink and realize, oh goodness, they're not kidding.
Well, I mean, they've already run the numbers, so I mean, for any um so far as any tactical nuclear weapons, aiming at the major cities would be ineffective because the Soviets built the cities to tank Western nuclear weapons anyway.
So
Um,
Kiev is nuclear resistant.
yeah, like the reason you saw everybody hanging out in the metro is it was designed to deal with nuclear detonations above the surface, let alone conventional bombs.
Yeah. I've heard there are actually buildings out there that if they were hit by nuclear explosion, like the frame, like the basic frame of the building would still be there intact.
Well, that's why The buildings you see surviving at Hiroshima are all the if a building is made mostly of concrete, it'll survive a nuclear explosion.
Yeah.
At least a small one. Um, with regards to if they try battlefield uses of them, all you have to do
That's
is
what I think they're
disperse
gonna
your
do.
units.
That's what I think they're gonna do. They're gonna use tactical nukes.
Well, but all you have to do is avoid concentrating your troops too heavily in one position,
But
and the effect will be minimal.
the other thing is that Russia has plenty of ways they can inflict massive losses on the Ukrainians without nuclear weapons. They could use thermobaric weapons.
Ineffective against all but like dismounted infantry. What would be the point of that?
Right.
I mean, they've left the Ukrainians so much equipment. I mean, their latest offensive could almost have been sustained purely through captured Russian equipment. Um,
Yeah. It reminds me of it's like the reverse of what happened, when the US quickly left Iraq and ISIS sort of just took the Humvees that were there.
well, those were Humvees given to the Iraqi army, not necessarily just left behind.
Oh, okay. But also, I think this
Um,
similar thing happened when the Americans pulled out of northern Syria. They sort of just left behind like I don't know if it was it may have been that the only thing they left behind then was like a Kool-Aid or sorry a refrigerator. That might have been the only thing they didn't take with them.
sounds about right. Often, I mean, we've probably lost more Abrams to just intentional destruction than to actual enemy combat. It's not an invalid way, but you'll notice the Russians didn't even bother to sabotage the stuff they left behind.
Yeah, that's surprised. I mean, it's just a chaotic retreat. Like did you see that video of a tank like running over Russian soldiers crashing into a tree over the music of
Oh, of course.
yeah,
The clown music, yeah.
the
Oh, it
Yaku
was
sex
extremely
theme.
funny. It was extremely funny.
The music was the best touch to
I
it.
mean, the irony is it maintained being as funny as it was because, of course, the first part of it where all the infantry are falling off, they were likely being shot off of it. But I mean, even this whole thing is just a farce. They've
Yeah.
already lost the war. It's just a matter of time and blood. I mean, we now have Ukrainian aircraft that have no right to be flying in the sky still.
Mhm.
That's 40 years old. Performing accurate close air support.
Yep. I
How do you
mean,
even do that? Like that would be like, in the Gulf War, the Iraqis being in the middle of Saudi Arabia already,
yeah.
freely performing strikes with, their Su-21s.
The other news is that's been happening, and actually, this will lead me to my next question: is that the ratification process for Finland and Sweden is almost complete, and there's only two remaining countries. Can you guess which ones they are?
Of course, although ironically, I think it's mostly a matter of the parliamentary timetable than
Yeah,
any deliberate action. Because I mean, even Slovakia was the third last one,
right.
and it was
Um,
fully in support.
right. And from what I'm hearing, at least Hungary, doesn't think they're gonna hold it up.
I'm sure there have been some fairly ugly threats,
I mean,
towards their direction if they should try.
right.
Um,
So, but I think like in the end, Hungary's not going to object. They're gonna let it happen. Turkey, they might try to extract concessions.
I'm sure there'll be some token deportations of Kurds and such.
Yeah.
All worth it. For the greater good.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we really could have Christy on the call. I think she might have some things to say about that.
Oh, I'm sure she's very unhappy with.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
the way I see it, the four countries currently occupying Kurdish land, none of them are really American allies. I think a win-win to basically support Kurdish statehood in the entire territory.
Perhaps the fundamental problem with the Kurds is of how left wing they are.
They're actually very pro-Israel, though.
Only by process of elimination. But I
Yeah,
mean, it's
I mean the
undeniable that the PKK is a communist party.
right,
And that many of their friends, in the
but
YPG are fairly to the left. It shouldn't be a barrier for them to
Yeah. I mean, we let
not be
China
attacked,
exist.
but
We
yeah,
let,
but not as a friend.
yeah. I mean, but I just, I don't know how big the PKK is within the Kurdish side. I'm assuming there are more moderate groups that dominate. No?
Not really. I mean, the one group that was attacked this week, I forget the name of the party, is more right-leaning, but they're more Iraqi Kurd, and they're not very expansionist relative to, um, they're more Syrian friends. The thing I've found interesting is why the Iranians think that this is a good time to pick a fight with the
Oh,
Kurds.
yeah. I mean, speaking of Iran, like those protests that have been like is that not the are the protests not the only thing that have been happening in Iran?
I heard Khomeini's almost dead, but aside from that,
Yeah, I mean, I that's there was someone who I was there was the name being thrown around Shireen something who you know who I'm talking about?
in what sense?
I
What
think
is it? Who is this
someone who
person?
might have been leading the protests or something like that, or I'm not sure. Why have I heard that name before? I do not know. But I heard
I
it.
don't know either.
Okay, anyway, protests happening in Iran, women burning hijabs, getting arrested. One died in custody. That's what's going on.
Sounds about right. I mean, fundamentally, if that entire region decides to rise up, the Iranians are going to have a serious problem.
Yeah, I mean, their country basically consists of there's like a whole Turkic population in the north.
Well, there are more Azerbaijanis in Iran than in Azerbaijan.
Wow. I mean,
So, but I mean, you figure that if those people, decide that they do not want to be under Iranian rule, it's going to be a problem.
right. I mean, honestly, I have hope, more so than I had before, because you probably would agree with me on this, that right now, Russia, China, and Iran comprise a modern day axis.
Of course, although not a terribly loyal Axis, given how everybody else in the Axis, kind of Iran, have largely refused to help Russia.
Right. And I find it hopeful that maybe the current events could bring down two out of those three regimes.
More likely, it'll just put them in subservience to the third leg, which is fine with me.
To China?
Um, oh yeah, that's what they want. That's why they're helping, or that's why they're not helping the Russians, because they see that if the existing regime falls, Siberia is theirs. As far as I'm
Oh,
concerned, they can have it.
China can have Siberia. So you
Oh yeah.
prefer. Okay. I mean, well, that probably means they also take over Mongolia because that's currently in the way.
Mm, I think they just leave it out of the way just to not have any trouble.
Yeah. I mean, it could become like another Lesotho, like a country
Mm,
surrounded on all sides by one other country.
well, but it's effectively surrounded by two hostile countries. Is there any difference?
Right. I mean, wait, isn't like Mongolia like on good terms with like Russia and China?
They're on good terms with it. They're one of those states that's on good terms with everybody, as they have to be.
Well, they kind of have to be with the two countries that are sandwiched in between.
But I mean, they had some fairly harsh words for the Russians trying to enter, and for the forceful drafting of very Asiatic minorities.
Yeah.
Um, so they're no fools.
No, I mean like one I'm actually curious to know like if Putin resigns, does the Russian Federation disintegrate?
He'd only resign if he was about to be executed
Yeah, I mean
in true, the death of Stalin fashion.
cuz
He'll
my
stay there until the end, and you know,
yeah, I
he's
mean
somebody where you do have to wonder what the last move will be as their forces are finally driven out.
right. And I mean my father once actually described Russia's control over the Caucasus among a few other places as the last vestige of European colonialism, and the fact that they've gotten a free pass on that is a major victory for the left. You know, the fact that the or I mean like
Well,
in the
it's funny
anti-American
to
left.
it's funny to watch the usual suspects crow about Western imperialism, and then have a hammer and sickle in there.
Oh, for sure.
Bio. There's nothing unusual or surprising there.
Right. I mean,
It has been good to see. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to Italy eventually, but to watch the two more pro-Putin right-wing parties get absolutely butchered, and at least the nominally more pro-West party do very
yeah.
well.
What is the actual share of the vote between the FDI, the League, and Forza Italia? Does that how
Mm,
much does that block together comprise?
I think about 60% of the seats, something
Wow.
like that.
That with only like 45% of the vote?
Well, it's all the first. I mean, if we look at I have let's say the lower house results in front of me. In terms of the proportional seats, they won 114 out of maybe 200.
Wow.
I'd have to look at the
That's
electoral
like
system list.
57%.
Oh, a little less. Let's see. Wait, 400 deputies. Well, technically 145. So actually, that's so 117 out of 245. So that's not a
Oh, that's
majority
not a, oh
in
the
the
oh
purport.
the block didn't get a majority?
No, that's only in terms of the proportional seats, but in the terms of the first past the post seat,
Oh,
of which there are 100.
I didn't know that Italy's system was mixed member. I thought it was just PR.
No, they have PRC they in about not 2 to 1, but there's 240. They're out of 400 deputies in the lower house. 147 come from first past the post districts, 245 come from PR districts, and then 8 come from um, member abroad districts. But in the first, so in the proportional, the right did not get a majority. In the first past the post, out of that 147, they won 121 of them, winning almost
I
all
can't
of them.
whistle.
Um, Winning a lot of them, and we were seeing them as the results came in. They won a lot of very previously left-wing seats.
Well, I mean that doesn't surprise me. I mean, there is a pipeline in almost every country of communism to hard right nationalist.
Well, I mean, the government and the technically the current government was reelected.
We,
Um,
the,
because everybody except the Brothers of Italy was in the government.
right. I'm you have to explain that.
Well, the current government is a national unity government, right?
Right. Draghi,
Under
right?
yeah, under a technocratic leader.
Yeah.
This is just a restoration of the previous party system.
Although, mind you, with a major new player.
Well, major, because I mean, the Brothers of Italy have been a player for a while. They're not a new party.
Right. It's just that
They're just a
the,
party that has taken that faction of the right over from the League.
what it was described as was the most right wing government since the Second World War in Italy.
Mm, it would be close to the first Bertinelli government. Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Right. I mean, it's. I'm actually really happy, by the way, that Berlusconi and Salvini are like what of the of the total. Okay, so what was the total seat share for the right?
237 out of 400.
Okay, and of that count, how much is Brothers of Italy?
119.
Wow. So just barely a majority of the two.
Yeah, and there's 119 for them, 66 for the League, 45 for Bertinelli, and then 7 for some other
Wait,
smaller right-wing parties.
wait, not wait, are you Bortonelli, are you referring to Forza Italia?
Yes.
Isn't that Berlusconi?
Is that how you say it?
Oh, oh, that's yeah. How do you say it?
I don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I say Berlusconi.
Yeah, it's a shame they changed the electorate for the Senate because it before had some more entertaining results rather than just basically being a carbon copy of the lower house results.
Yeah, I find it funny. Like Italy has like some interesting like figures. Like apparently Renzi, when he had that referendum that he ultimately failed, in his resignation speech, he said, "Long live Italy and good luck to all of us."
Oh yeah.
It's like, wow. Anyway,
But I
I'm
mean, and the irony is this was Savani's election to lose, and he lost it.
yeah, he like lost it big time. But I mean that's uncomfortably close to say that of the right wing bloc, that to me is a little bit uncomfortable knowing that over like 100 seats in that bloc are pro Putin.
The the remaining members of Forza Italy should not be, um, given they're the more center-right group.
Yeah.
And then the league is just filled with weirdos. That's nothing new.
And
I
then
mean, the left has its own very left-wing party in it too, so it's not as if there's any real
yeah,
difference there.
the left basically fractured into like three different segments. Like you had Five Star, and then you had like the other center left parties, and
The movement, had they joined the center-left coalition, it would have actually been a real election.
yeah, yeah. It's funny how things shake out, isn't it?
I mean,
But
even though it probably would have been, even if the Article 5 party had joined with the left, it probably still would have been pretty close. Because obviously a lot of movement voters would have switched to the right in that case.
right.
Um,
So I mean, you're not concerned at all concerned that this new government is going to try to pull Italy out of NATO,
I mean, the current government has the movement in it and it didn't, so,
right?
And
Uh,
and she's already stated both support for that and support for Ukraine, so,
okay. So
um,
I mean that just the worry is that Salvini and Berlusconi, I mean, could they probably are not going to have that much influence. So
well, they'll have influence, but I don't ultimately think, I think a new election would be forced if they attempted to
right,
really, um, do anything.
yeah. What about
Um,
Sweden?
I haven't heard anything from them recently. I don't know if they've managed to
It
start overcoming their differences to be able to form a government.
it sounded like from what I was hearing that the other right wing parties are going to basically be in the coalition with the Sweden Democrats, basically be giving confidence and supply.
That would be the ideal arrangement, but I don't know if the liberals will agree to that.
Right. I mean,
And they have a
could
very narrow majority,
right
so
could the Social Democrats convince one of the right wing parties to break?
I doubt it because the
They only need one.
well, they would need one, but they would need the left's support as well.
Yeah.
And that should be enigma to both the
Yeah.
left and to them.
It's funny because I believe the Social Democrats actually gained seats, but the rest of the bloc
Yeah,
collapsed.
they did, yeah.
Yeah.
The right was very lucky that those other two made it over the threshold.
Yep.
That's the problem coming up in Latvia next week.
Sweden is pure PR, right?
Uh, it's regional PR, I
Oh,
think.
regional PR. Um, because I guess like based on what I was seeing, it almost seemed like that based on on sort of the margin, it was like a 1 seat majority, but it should have been something like a 4 seat majority, maybe, or 3 seat majority, based on the margin I was
Mm,
seeing.
yeah, the left got like an extra seat based on the regional trends.
Yeah,
But overall not terribly different. It was more just the right has more small parties than the left.
right. And UK also got a new prime minister and a new king in the same week.
Yes,
How do you feel about Truss?
I would have voted for the other guy.
Sunak?
Yeah, I was actually surprised how well he did.
Oh wow. How much of the vote did he get in the end?
Like 42%. I was
42%.
expecting 30.
Wow. I mean, I honestly thought Sunak was going to be the guy, but once I saw the first poll, I was like, yeah, it's going to be Truss.
Oh no, the polls had been overwhelmingly leaning Truss for a long time.
I just it was clear that the MPs wanted Sunak.
Yeah, but it wasn't it fair. It was closer than some of the previous ones had been.
Yeah, and apparently it's the most underwhelming margin for a prime minister chosen by the party, but not in between elections.
Sounds about right. I mean, this hasn't happened that many times, so the sample size is fairly small.
Yeah. And
Um,
I've been reading an article that basically that's labor is basically trying to be its angle itself to become more business friendly, might actually be able to steal the business friendly mantle from the Tories.
they could, but I mean, there's a long time until the next election, so.
You mean
No.
like a sexual harassment scandal could force Keir Starmer out 6 months before the election, like what happened to the Ontario Progressive Conservatives? Oh, you don't know about
Mm,
that?
no, I don't particularly follow every sex
So
scandal in a
so in
foreign country.
2018, so basically in 2015, about a year after the last Ontario election, which the Conservatives lost, they basically chose a new leader named Patrick Brown. He was chosen about 3 years in advance, and he basically spent about 2.5 years building up the party's platform, reaching out to the voters. Then, 5 months before the election, he was accused of sexual harassment and resigned. This led to a scramble to pick a new candidate, and that candidate was Doug Ford. He was picked 3 months before the election.
And it worked out well for him, so
Yep.
it's amazing how well that bunch has done.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot going on. Like in my hometown, there's actually an ongoing concern with anti-Semitism in the public schools. That's a salient issue in the school board elections this year. If
Well, I mean,
I
both
mean,
in Ontario and in Quebec now.
I'm not following what's going on in Quebec. Like Quebec, I know the CAQ is expected to get a thumping majority next month.
Oh, it's gonna be very easy for them, yeah. They're a party which is slightly more reasonable than their other independents
The
supporting
PQ,
friends,
the Parti Québécois.
or the other one.
Yeah,
What's it?
yeah.
It
The
has S in it.
Quebec Solidaire.
Yeah, but they're not a party I would be friends with.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Coalition Avenir Quebec has been pushing not only a language law, but they've also been pushing bans on religious apparel in the public sector, which, fuck them. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I mean, it's not a surprising policy from them. It's the same thing the French do.
Yeah, I mean,
Um, and they
still,
may as well be French, right?
yeah, I mean, just give them over to France, honestly. Like, but take Montreal, but give the rest of it. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, just let it become like just basically let it become a département de la mer of France. You
I
know,
would have let them leave a while ago. Then you'd get to severely end the bilingualism everywhere else.
well, I mean, there's still parts of Canada that are heavily bilingual. Like my part of the Ontario that I'm in is heavily bilingual. New Brunswick is bilingual.
The minority of it still, as the recent elections continue to show.
You mean the it's becoming more English speaking?
Well, it's majority English speaking, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And actually, New Brunswick actually elections actually tend to be along
That's my
linguistic
point.
lines,
And
the
the
same way that
English supporting
elections in the
party won.
South are on racial lines, and the
Yeah,
way elections in Ireland are on sectarian lines.
yeah. I think there's probably a bit more crossover than in either of those two other examples, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess back to my whole NATO question, which is that should Ukraine take Hungary's place in NATO?
Well, I would have kicked him out years ago, but um, I don't know if they'll give anybody the chance. I don't think anybody actually trusts them. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah,
let's just say I think everybody their position in the EU will likely become untenable if they attempt to vote against Ukrainian membership.
yeah, for sure. Um, what else is going on in the world, or anything in particular going on? Oh yeah, there were conflicts going on in Kyrgyzstan and Armenia.
Well, I mean, I got a lot of trouble on Twitter for expressing this, but the Armenians have chosen their side, and their side doesn't want to help them.
But I think,
So
but isn't it a good thing for America to sort of drive a wedge and maybe get Armenia on our side?
no, I'd rather have Azerbaijan as a friend.
They're a dictatorship though, and they're more aligned with
So,
Turkey.
so supposedly we're aligned with Turkey, are we not?
Right. Armenia is more has undergone a color revolution, so they're the ones I'd like to work with if they're willing to break away from Russia.
But I mean, they'll always side with them, you know, Just in the same way Azerbaijan will always side with Turkey.
Ukraine used to always side with Russia.
Well, until the government was overthrown by force.
Yeah. So it was, yeah, color revolution. So I'm optimistic. Like I'm actually optimistic, by the way, that when Lukashenko dies, that Belarus will become a Western democracy.
Somehow I think as soon as let's just say all the volunteers that are currently fighting head home, his position is going to become untenable.
Oh, there are Belarusian soldiers now.
There are tons of them. Their whole unit's made up of them.
Yeah, I mean, you just there's a lot going on, and yeah, sorry, actually also I'm also really distracted by stuff going on, and um, but I mean, I just wanted to record this so that we can really, because we have not talked in a long time, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a bit disappointed we couldn't get Christy on, but I'll talk to her very soon. Um, I mean, where let's talk about Ukraine for a second, because actually, if you know history, you'll know winter bails out the Russians is basically the story of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. So that's a worry I have, is that Ukraine is running out of time to actually win this thing.
I think the ones that, if you look at the people that actually held the Germans off the last time, a lot of them are Ukrainian.
Oh, really? Oh, you mean the ones who held the Nazis off?
Yes.
Interesting. So, look, and actually, you know what? I'm really interested in playing out the scenario you painted of China basically taking over Siberia. Like, how exactly would this happen? And
Well, I mean, so you figure, so say a breakthrough near the nuclear plant occurs, the Ukrainians drive all the way south, entirely encircling um the entire Russian army in Kherson. That army is annihilated. That basically puts an end to their professional army. Then the Ukrainians just sweep everything else.
including
Um,
Crimea.
yes, they blow the bridge up, they annihilate the forces there. Um, and then you just have some convenient coup at that rate.
Yeah. I'd love to see someone like draw a map at this point, and let's say we get let's say we get a double whammy. Let's say the Ayatollahs collapse in Iran. Where does China come in?
Unlikely.
Oh, you think
But yeah,
that's
that's
unlikely?
less likely just because there's no force to easily replace them.
Right. So you don't think China will just sweep in and take like a bunch of Iran's territory? Does China even share a border with Iran?
No, they're
Okay,
not even
that's why.
close.
That's why. But I'm curious. Like, I'm guessing Azerbaijan seizes a bunch of territory. Um, that's actually one of the things I'm worried about, is that I think Israel could be on eventually face the next Arab-Israeli war. I think is going to be a one-front war, but Israel basically against the combined forces of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon.
Eh, I don't think Iraq has the stability to join any wars, nor does Lebanon. Um, and the Syrians would lose in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things I heard is that the reason why Israel has not been vocally condemning what's going on in Russia is that my father thinks that they have some sort of backdoor deal whereby Israel basically doesn't join the sanctions, and return Putin basically lets Israel operate in Syria.
Well, it's partly that. It's partly as well that, of course, the Israeli government is supported by I forget what Jewish Home is calling itself now, but whatever, what's his name? Bennett. Um, their current his main base is Russian Jews,
Right.
and they're likely
Really?
fully
I thought that was.
supportive of the
Are
invasion.
you confusing him with Lieberman?
Oh yes, I am Lieberman. Yes,
So that's is
I
Israel our
think he's
home?
yeah. They used to be called Jewish Home.
Yeah, that's a different party. That's now called the right.
Is it?
Or is
It's been a long
is
time.
it Yamina? I don't know.
No, it's not. The party's name has changed. The last time I looked at the party names was about 7 years ago, so
Okay. I
I'm sure
mean,
they've changed. But Lieberman, yes, the one who will never join with Bibi. Um,
Yeah. That's funny, by the way. I have not been looking at the polls, but apparently Netanyahu looks like he might come back to power.
It'll be tight as usual.
Yeah.
He needs to go. The right would easily win if he was gone.
Oh, absolutely. And Brazil, is it still looking like Lula's gonna win?
Oh, by a lot. He'll be lucky to be forced to a runoff. He should have left and let somebody else run, so that'll be another disaster.
Bolsonaro should have let someone else run.
Yeah, either that former justice minister or
Or I mean,
anybody else on the right, literally.
yeah, he had like a good finance minister in charge for a while.
Yeah.
I think Eduardo Reyes, maybe.
But instead, we'll just all go down with the ship.
Yep. You said something's going on in Latvia very soon.
Election in 3 days.
Election in 3 days, and who is expected to win?
It's gonna be a shit show because I can show you.
I have not been following the Latvian election,
I had the poll up. Let's
but are
find it.
there genuine concern for reason for concern?
Yes.
Uh-oh, that's not good because
The,
that's a Baltic state.
the reason for concern, let's see if I can find it. The reason for concern is that, um, that's kind of an old poll. Can we get anything better? Polls on Croatia, but none from Latvia.
Oh,
Thanks,
there's an
guys.
election in Croatia as well.
No, I'm just reading through the list of polls. Damn. But to where there's a large number of parties there, and who falls above and below the threshold will really matter. Because here I'll list the parties out. So you have New Unity, a very good party. They're going to easily win first place. They're at 21%. The National Alliance, they're a reasonably good party, bit hardcore at 11. The ZZ S, which is a green kind of party, they're at 9. The LRA, which I'm reasonably sure is a pro-Russian party these days. Or am I thinking of somebody else? I'm thinking of somebody else. They're fine. Bit centralist. And then some left-wing parties that are kind of pro-Russia, 8. And then a decent party, I forget what it
Yeah.
stands for,
Is
at
it
6. And then you have parties at 5, 5, 4, 4, 4, and 4. The
right?
threshold's 5.
Is it Estonia that has a concerning number of Russians in its territory?
Oh, they all have concerning number of Russians, but
Oh,
the question is, if the pro-Russian parties get above the threshold and the right-wing parties fall below, there's gonna be a problem. If it's the
uh-oh.
other way around, it'll be fine.
Right. Okay, because
Um,
the left wing parties might be pro-Russian, or they are pro-Russian.
uh, a lot of them are. There's 3 left-wing parties and 2 of them are pro-Russian,
Yeah.
including the previously dominant Social Democratic Party.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we'll have to watch. You'll have to cover to Saturday night when I log back on. You'll have to give me the down low on Latvia.
Yeah, I mean, it ironically, if everybody falls below the threshold, the potential for having one of the least representative parliaments will happen.
Oh wow.
Because I mean, it'll be the what was it? Slovakia has that,
Oh,
to where
Slovakia
only
has.
like either Slovenia or Slovakia, one of the two, has a parliament. Only like 2/3 of the votes actually counted, if that,
Mm-hmm.
because the rest of them got thresholded to death.
Right. And so just a bit of, I'm just curious to know what you think the timeline is going to be in terms of what I'm trying in terms of the final ratifications for Sweden and Finland.
I've heard October.
Oh,
Sometime in October, both Hungary and Turkey's parliaments will be coming back.
oh wow, okay. So, not too long from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I expected Russia to go all out after the
This
pieces
is
of
them all
paper.
out.
This
This
is
is all out. They have no cards left. Their army is to be is, as the commander in chief said, their professional army is either held in place or annihilated.
You think they would have,
And
though, they would have signed a piece of paper that's, or a piece of toilet paper that said, "We claim this,"
of course,
and they wouldn't
but
even do
this
that.
this is all their cards. What they're playing here is every card they have, and it just these cards don't work anymore. You can throw a million untrained fools into the field. Half of them are going to starve on the way there. The other half are going to shoot their officers and try and surrender. The prison term for murdering somebody in Russia is lower than that of avoiding the draft. It's a great incentive, I think.
Wow. I mean, isn't the possible punishment for murdering the draft though?
Unlikely.
Yeah. I mean, because like
Um,
prisoners are being drafted.
yeah, but I don't know if they're stupid enough to draft someone who's already killed an officer
Yeah.
into the army. That just, I mean, maybe. Um,
Um. So I mean, has Eritrea invaded Ethiopia? Apparently, the
um,
Eritrean troops are in
well, I
Tigray
mean,
now.
I don't know. It doesn't really count as an invasion if you're doing so in support of the legitimate government.
Right. And if correct me if I'm wrong, I think in Ethiopia the constituent parts have technically have the right to leave whenever they want.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, there's this I've tried to keep like up about what's going on in places. I'm actually curious to know if there's anything else that we haven't talked about.
Well, I mean, we have the excellent result in Chile, them finally rejecting a left-wing proposal after
Yeah, that
the
was
last six
expected.
times.
That was expected to
Oh, the
happen though.
margin was wider than I think most expected.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
Yeah.
you have the Germans looking like fools as always. There's nothing new there. Um, managing to do the worst thing at every possible turn. Um, I know things in the Solomon Isles are getting worse. Um,
Ugh.
with their pro-Chinese government.
Yeah, I was actually
Um,
expecting that when he lost his parliamentary majority, I was expecting he would lose too, but he didn't. Because I think there was like after he made that decision to recognize the People's Republic of China, I think he like lost his parliamentary majority, and then there was like a presidential election, like or that where he or I think they elect him. So I was expecting him to lose too, but he held on, but without his majority.
yeah, it tends to happen. And so, the more radical elements, um, want him removed by force, which obviously I'm in favor of in all cases. Um,
Right. Um, is there anything going on in Colombia that we should be aware of, like particularly with between them and
nothing
Venezuela?
good. Nothing
Nothing good.
good. They're probably more left wing than Venezuela these days. I mean, an excellent result in Kenya, culminating in a very boring court case.
Right.
Um,
I'm
so I mean,
just
that was fun. I really enjoyed that. They're strange. They're interesting people, the Kenyans.
oh, the Republican nominee for governor of Pennsylvania is absolutely floundering.
Oh yeah, he'll lose.
Yep. I mean,
Fortunately, Oz is getting closer and closer, and per what we know about the polls, that should be good enough.
as long as Fetterman's over 50%, I think he's gonna win.
It's not so much a question of being because the polls are off entirely. They're Midwest polls. They're garbage. It's
Right.
like
Yeah,
those
no.
Biden 17 polls we saw from Wisconsin. The same effect is still happening. So I mean, if we're probably less than 5 points behind, we're probably fine.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm actually genuinely surprised. Apparently, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but apparently Tucker Carlson, when that news of the attacks on the pipeline, he basically immediately speculated that it was probably America that did it.
I should have gone on his show and said, here. We should the Ukrainians should have had that pipeline bombed on March the 1st.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess I am a bit surprised Russia did blow up its own pipeline.
Well, it's a matter of it's the same exact thing as just blatantly threatening everybody. They really believe their own speeches.
Yeah, that's to me is the crazy part is that when you
They
know
unironically believe they're winning. That they're not at war, that they're holding back, that they have more cards to play, that their forces, are heroes and all this other nonsense. They unironically believe this stuff. You watch their television, it's just madness.
yeah, I'm
And
honestly,
it's extremely funny to watch, honestly.
but I
I mean,
mean,
they're unironically throwing away hundreds of thousands of their own people, and they're happy to do so.
yeah, that's why in many ways like Russia is very similar to Iran in that sense.
It
They
is, but they don't. The thing that keeps that the one thing that
oh,
that
this is a
Iran
good
has going for it is that they're not so. It's not a personality cult. There's an underlying ideology there. It's not a particularly good ideology, but it is an ideology, and that prevents, I think, the sort of just basic denial of, maybe this we shouldn't do this, that the Russians, consistently have. Um, I'm greatly more afraid of the Iranians and the Chinese than the Russians. The Russians are fools. The only problem is they're fools with nuclear weapons. Um,
yeah,
Otherwise they'd be considered no differently than any other random militia someplace, with fancy equipment that nobody cares about.
yeah, and that's actually a worrying thing is that Russia has nuclear weapons. They could very well, for all we know, be pointed at us. If we
Well,
deploy,
I think the concerning thing is that the White House's first reaction to, oh, well, we may use tactical nuclear weapons isn't just, if you do this, we'll level Moscow. The
right,
use of nuclear weapons at any level against anyone should be considered an act of war. Um, and there should be no sort of waffling or any of this other nonsense. No, those weapons constitute an entire new class of attack, and they should only be met with the strongest possible response, um, to discourage anyone from thinking of using them.
okay, so okay. This tweet looks like it's out of date, but it says Putin is set to announce his temporary annexation in 2 days. This is 5 hours ago, so that looks like it's out of date.
Well, the way the news moves these days, that's true. But I think the irony is going to be his speech, and I heard of his speech in 2 days. Um, is that it's likely going to be the same day that his forces in Limit are forced to surrender. So
Okay.
really, everybody else will be celebrating.
Oh wow. Yeah. No. Looks like we're looking at a major breakthrough in Lyman.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
they're surrounded on both sides. I mean, even the latest map put out by the Russian bloggers is hilarious. That the Russians don't feel the need to withdraw, if they even could.
right. I guess I might as well ask you this since we actually haven't talked in months, but what effect do you think, back to American politics, what effect do you think Dobbs is going to have on the midterms?
It isn't good for us, is it?
Yeah, it's now, I think now everyone seems to acknowledge it's a neutral year.
I don't think it'll be neutral. I think it'll be maybe R3 to 5.
You think so?
Um, I think things are slowly swinging back towards us. Um, I think we have the problem that if this was going to be a low turnout year, we would lose. Low turnout midterms don't exist anymore. So that will help us, I think. That's why, when we got the turnout figures from, say, Virginia, we were all very happy because our voters are now, sort of the types that don't show up to special elections. But they should turn out to midterms. So as long as turnout is high, we will win.
Yeah,
Um,
that and if turnout's high, that means turnout among Latinos is higher, and that should benefit the GOP.
well, it'll be more about, people who aren't, non-college educated. Those are the types, those type of white voters that have become very red these days. Latinos will probably, their turnout was probably going to be not low, but well, not low for them, but
Right.
probably low-ish for them. But I mean, even today's poll, had Abbott tied with Latinos in Texas.
Yeah. Oh, did you see that candidate out in Ohio against Captor who's faked his military record?
I the scandal was fairly funny because on the face of it, there is no scandal. It's only because of his inability to keep his mouth shut that it's become a problem. Because I mean, if you just don't talk and you've said, "Oh, I served in Afghanistan," most people, I think, would charitably interpret served as a logistics officer in a base right before Afghanistan as good enough.
Right.
Um, but
But he couldn't. He couldn't do that.
it could, yeah, and I don't think that it's lean D as we see today. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
I
Tilty.
I'd be very surprised still if she wins. Um,
She's an institution in that area though.
she is, but it's a Trump 4 seat.
Trump
So
3. I'm
I've
pretty sure.
seen 4. It's probably a decimal that people round.
Yeah.
Regardless, um, it doesn't, and I mean, obviously, if there was no governor's race, I'd be really worried. But the governor's race will have us,
Yeah, DeWine has that in the
everybody
bag.
out. So Hill should be able to help a lot of these people
Yeah.
across the line.
Here's a name you haven't heard in a while, Nan Wheatley.
Who?
I think she's the Democratic nominee for governor in Ohio.
Oh, yeah, yeah. She's gonna lose by 30 points.
Exactly. But I say who? Exactly.
And I also think a lot of the polls we've been seeing, Ohio polling is trash.
Yeah.
It's among the worst in the country. The
Yeah, the
polls are
Midwest,
garbage.
the Midwest in
So
general is the they
Ohio is particularly bad. Ohio is probably among the worst. So I mean, you have to figure if a poll showed Biden winning, the poll is bad.
yeah, I mean,
So
so yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've actually kept Vance as lean R despite the fact that he's trailing in every poll because I figure he's probably going to win anyway.
he's just gonna win by default. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I don't
Um,
like Vance. I don't think Eric or I like Vance.
the only reason I don't particularly care about Vance is that he doesn't actually believe anything, so he's not really a threat.
Yeah.
Pure opportunists are easy to work with. Um,
What about Arizona? Because I'm actually genuinely worried that Lake is actually going to win.
I'm marginally surprised how bad Hobbs is doing. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
the fact that she's losing to a woman who basically just shouts "debate me" across the room is really funny.
yeah.
Um, and it's honestly it's comical because
See,
the the uh,
that is silly zone material right there.
the the, the only problem now, I personally don't like Lake, but
Neither do I.
so far as being a candidate purely, yeah, on candidate terms, she's not actually that trash. Um, just because she was a TV
Yeah,
presenter,
yeah, and I mean,
she can speak well, and apparently Hobbs just can't.
right. I just think,
Um,
by the way, like for various reasons, that entire Republican statewide ticket, except for Kimberly Yee, is trash.
yeah, they managed to screw it up again. Um,
Yeah.
and it's honestly it's still really funny. Masters though is probably gonna lose. I'd be very surprised if he was able to pull it out.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
honestly, if I were voting in Arizona, I would honestly write D down like the statewide ticket except for treasurer.
I would probably not be terribly comfortable with my vote since I don't particularly like Hobbs. Um,
I mean, Hobbs seems like the least worst option at the moment.
maybe, but the only really good thing is that the state legislature isn't competitive, so we're very lucky there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's for sure.
they managed to cock that up, so we're very
Yeah,
lucky.
isn't the legislature technically uncontested R because they didn't run enough candidates?
I think it's a tie, I think.
Oh,
I don't think they can take control at all. I think they're running like exactly 50%. But a couple of those are in seats they're not gonna win, so
right.
it may as well be.
They had that
Um,
strategy the last time of running a single candidate
we
in
de
competitive seats.
we desperately need to change the electoral system in Virginia. It's such a joke.
Arizona,
Oh yeah, that dual seat for the House
yeah,
idea is such a
multi-member
nightmare.
seats.
But it's multi-member seats with like one vote practically. It's very bad. It's not a good system. Um, and
Right.
it also it's an even numbered lower house chamber. Like
Yeah,
why?
I don't like what they do. I think in like New Hampshire, West Virginia, and Vermont, where you have like some seats that are single member and then some seats that are like 5 members.
Well, the New Hampshire's is very close to the sort of urban rural system that's been proposed before, and that's fine.
Right.
There are enough seats, there are way too many seats, but there's enough seats to where you don't get if something ties in New Hampshire, it's fine. If something ties in Arizona, you have a problem. Because of just how few seats there are, but that definitely needs to be changed. I mean, just looking around the map, I mean, Texas is looking fine. Our latest map is gonna do really well for us. Florida's looking really
Yeah,
good.
Texas. I
Um,
mean, I'm keeping my eyes on the 23rd and 24th seats going down the decade. That would be
it's
Gonzalez and Beth Van Dyne.
Beth should be fine. She outperformed the top of the ticket by like 15 points, no? So,
I
um,
think she barely won when Biden won the seat by like 4
I remember. Well,
on
no, in
on
the new
on the
in
old
the new
version.
seat, in the new seat, that's how they did the numbers.
Oh, okay.
Because
Yeah.
you can put you can run it on the house numbers. She'll be fine. By the
Mm,
end of the decade, it could be a problem, but we're probably losing statewide if we're losing that district anyway. So
yeah. I
I
mean,
wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, just elsewhere, I mean,
I was curious to know, by the way, if they would be actually be able to not only shore up all their incumbents, but also potentially get back the 7th and the 32nd. Or that would
in
have been,
Texas,
yeah, that would have been impossible.
they didn't do that,
They
which is
didn't do
good.
that, but could they have?
No.
Okay.
They chose that map is almost perfect. I think the valley, I still don't know why
Yeah.
they keep the strips around. I would have deleted them years ago.
Do you think
Um,
do you think I mean one thing I'm wondering is do you think after this election they'll probably make all 3 of those seats narrow Biden seats?
no.
What do you think they're going to do with the Valley?
Well, they need to, what I would have done is draw one seat for the South for, I forget the name of the city
Brownsville,
down there.
McAllen?
No, along the border.
Oh, all the way to Loretto?
Yeah, just a Loretto seat. So all of the South, basically, be a 99% Hispanic district, right? And then just have a normal San Antonio seat. Um, and then just a seat with everything else in the middle. There's no need for the ugly strips. There's no need anymore. Hispanic voter turnout is high enough now that you do not need, um, seats to maintain their access or whatever.
So I mean you mean like the swiggle from Austin to San Antonio, the 35th?
No, you need that so far. You need that so long as the Hispanic populations in each are not big enough for their own seat.
Right. So I mean, because what they did was they basically put 3 seats that what I noticed they did is 4 seats in Houston, 3 seats in Dallas, 3 seats in Austin, San Antonio, and then I'm pretty sure they did like one in El Paso, and then am I forgetting any? Like I really feel like I'm forgetting like 4-3-3, yeah, 1 4-3-3-1, and then some seats in the Rio Grande Valley that are I'm pretty sure is just a transitional map anyway.
Yeah, it's about right. I mean, if you remember, this version is actually superior to the first thing they proposed.
Yeah.
Um, we
is
had a
is
lot of complaints about the first version in the valley, so they gave us one, but I think they could have given us two.
is a 27-11 map possible?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
Not unless the valley continues to go.
Okay, so you think 26-12?
Yeah. Whatever the current arrangement is with two swing seats, or with one very red seat and one increasingly swingy seat. is fine with me.
So, I mean, could they have done like the Rio Grande Valley, 2 red seats, 1 blue seat?
That's what I would have done. But until Alabama wins, its VRA case, that probably was not safe.
Oh, do you see the maps that I posted that basically show what the South could look like if the VRA that part of the VRA were struck down?
Yeah, there's no. I don't understand why people care about the like 4 black seats left in the South. Um,
I mean, they could draw a
that could
seven
be.
to zero map in Alabama. They could draw a 4-0 map in
Yeah, but
Mississippi.
it's for. But you have the problem is, who cares? It's like when there's other seats left on the table that you don't need, such as seats in Kentucky, or when we finally get to draw the map in North Carolina, there's no point to targeting these random black axis seats in these other states. There's literally no point to it.
Right. So
Um,
you think Republicans should just back down?
just take the draw your 1 blue seat and stop. That's all we need. You
But
don't. Our new interpretation of the VRA is going to be that, once Alabama wins, that as long as you're not cutting up black areas, you're fine.
but I demonstrated that, like, depending on the Supreme Court rules, you can draw a 7-0 map in Alabama. You could draw a six. I drew a 6-0 map in Louisiana.
Outside of straight striking that down, no, you can't. They're two together. The one in Louisiana is probably the most vulnerable without any standards, but I would say it still isn't safe. The Dem party there is too competitive to risk.
I mean, I basically cracked New Orleans 3 ways, and I also cracked Baton Rouge 3 ways.
You know,
That's how I
I
did it.
wouldn't risk it. I wouldn't risk such a thing with what they have. But there's just no point. It's like when seats elsewhere, when the seats up, there's that many seats up in Michigan for grabs.
Yeah, I'm actually genuinely surprised Michigan doesn't have a single VRA seat.
Well, it's because the commission ignored the VRA when they drew things. That commission screwed literally everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
I,
Michigan should have a 1 VRA seat.
yeah, but they intentionally didn't do that in order to maximize competitiveness, which if you're doing that, your map is going to suck by
Is
default.
is Ilhan Omar's seat majority white? I think it is.
Yeah, should be.
Yeah. So it's not at all a VRA seat. But it's just a super.
Well, it depends on your definition. I mean, technically, I guess if Arabs were a majority, they could probably count, right?
Right. I mean, it's worth it. Can you draw an Arab majority seat anywhere?
If you can probably for the Michigan State House, you probably can.
Michigan State House, probably.
Yeah,
What about a Somali seat in Minnesota?
doubt it. There's not that many of them.
Okay.
I don't think you're gonna get to 500,000
No,
all that
I mean
easily.
on the state house, state house.
Oh, probably.
Yeah. I mean, in
Um,
Michigan, I don't know. I don't think you can draw a Michigan congressional district that's majority Arab. Can you?
in what state?
Michigan.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I mean, Congress is out of the question. But by the way, I don't know if you saw that map, a map I drew of New York. I mean, I did a bunch of a bunch of maps I published on my YouTube channel. My map of New York drew 2 double-digit Trump seats in Manhattan, in Brooklyn. Actually,
Yeah.
in New York City.
Yeah, you can you fairly easily do that. One on Staten Island and then one to
Once,
connect the 2 dissonant areas in Brooklyn.
yeah, no, there's one that the 10th district that I drew actually connects Borough Park with Williamsburg and then a couple
I drew a
others.
big U.
A big U.
Yeah.
You got to show me that sometime.
Yeah, very ugly map, quite intentionally. But
Yeah.
I think Dems got quite lucky. Their original map would have been good for them, but this map, they really did. They literally lost like a seat relative to the map that was struck down.
I actually managed to draw a map of New York State where there were only 14 out of the 26 seats were safe Dem. You
Yeah,
had
you can fairly easily do that.
6 Republican seats, I think. Actually, no, 5 Republican seats, and I want to say 7 highly competitive seats.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I actually 3 out of the 4 seats I drew on Long Island were highly competitive. 3 seats in the Hudson Valley are well. Actually, truth is, one of those seats is kind of Upper Hudson Valley, an area near Albany, stretching all the way to Binghamton and Ithaca.
Yeah,
And still, it actually is like Biden plus like 1.5.
sounds about right.
Yeah, and but I also drew a kind of competitive seat that's Syracuse and Utica.
Yeah, but you're never gonna get that without, and since we're never taking the state senate back, especially under the new map.
Yeah,
Um,
but there's a commission, and the courts are still somehow on our side.
not really. Didn't the one of the conservative justices leave
Oh, did that just happen?
a couple of weeks ago, I think.
Okay, I mean, but they basic. So do you think Hochelander 2.0?
I doubt they'll try a redraw, which may not even be legal in New York.
Yeah, I feel like that should be like the case everywhere. Like no mid-decade redraws.
I think they're not terribly useful, except in the case where states don't have valid legislatively drawn maps, like in Ohio and Carolina.
Well, what about Texas in 2000?
Well, that was a case of us undoing a gerrymander, so I'm not gonna complain about that.
Yeah, that's
That lot overwhelmingly deserved a mid-district redraw.
Did they also
Uh,
redraw? Did they also redraw the state legislature?
I can't remember if they did.
Just
Probably
go.
not.
Okay, because I mean, like
That
that.
usually isn't legal. The rules for state legislatures are usually stricter than that for Congress. Actually, I can just look it up. Delay.
Delamander.
Yeah.
But what do I call?
Well, I mean, the new map wasn't that different. Or wasn't that radical relative, not to the map that came before it, but definitely to the map that came before that.
Mhm.
Let's see. No, it was only Congress was the only thing they redrew.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I think have we exhausted, pretty much everything we have to talk about, or
Well, I mean, going around the rest of the states, I mean, Wisconsin's gonna be close as usual.
governor
Uh,
and senate?
oh yeah. Although Johnson will win the governor's race as a toss-up.
Johnson will. Oh, Johnson the Senate race.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I have that race at tilde R. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell
Uh,
it, Barnes will lose. The money's finally come in.
yeah, and I
Johnson always overperforms his polls.
yeah, and it's unlikely Johnson's going to do as badly as Trump did in Waukesha and like the Wow.
Oh yeah. We've thrown Michigan away. That's gonna be a massacre. Iowa's gonna be easy.
I was good. What?
New
How are we
Ha-
doing? How are we doing in the AG race in Iowa?
we're probably gonna lose as usual now.
Why?
One dude's still around, isn't he?
Yeah, but I mean, people ticket split less now, right?
Not in Iowa. They ticket split plenty.
I mean, don't sleep on Brenna Bird is what I'm gonna say. I would
New
not.
Mexico is looking pretty rough, so that's gonna be tragic.
I mean, I'm just
Um,
looking like it's gonna be a really close race. I mean, Michelle Luan Grissom is not running a good campaign.
yeah, but she's still what, 10 points up in the polls?
And how accurate are the polls in New Mexico?
It shouldn't be that disgustingly bad, no.
Right.
But who knows? Colorado's gonna be a massacre. Now
Colorado's a lost
Nevada's looking
cause.
really good.
Oh yeah, Nevada. What's going on in Nevada? Like, and
We better win.
keep in mind, Republicans tend to underperform their polls there.
Not by that much. And Dems are also not running a very good campaign there, whereas we are actually doing so for
Masto and
like the first
Sisolak.
time in the last decade. Yeah.
Oh wow, they're both incumbents, so that surprises me.
Well, it's just that they've been limited by obviously that they're maintaining a lot of their COVID restrictions. That isn't helping.
Yeah, basically, I
Um,
drew a hypothetical presidential election. You wake up the next morning. I pretty much have like Michigan, Minnesota called for Biden, Wisconsin called for Trump, North Carolina called for Trump, Georgia called for Biden. and Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania uncalled. I'm like, who wins?
Dems.
You think so?
Yeah, if we're not winning on the night of, we're losing.
Okay.
And then I mean,
Actually,
Minnesota is gonna be very blue. New Hampshire, we're gonna get just totally destroyed. We managed to cock that up really well.
oh no, governor's
Uh,
race is going to be a massacre.
yeah, but everything else is gonna be a massacre. Maine isn't looking terribly good, but who knows? The
Yeah, no,
polls are
Maine's
trash.
looking like even worse than New Hampshire, honestly.
Um, and everything. Georgia's gonna be tight, but I think we've got it.
Yeah, I mean, Kemp's
See,
gonna blow
you
out.
can run genuine idiots for anything as long as they don't say problematic things. You're fine. If they just continue to ramble about things that no one knows what they're talking about, then you're not offending anybody.
What about Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Education?
I think the polls there are really wrong. If the polls show the governor race is close, the poll is wrong.
Right, but I mean,
So
it's worth
the
noting
polls,
that even in the South, saying you want to cut education funding is political suicide.
but we've still managed to win on platforms like that. And Oklahoma is such a red state in a year that's going to be red that we should be able to hold that. It'll be close, but um
Yeah,
we're getting more and more. I mean, we've seen a lot of our every primary we celebrate the kicking out of, pro teachers union
right.
members of the party. So
All
we're
right.
getting closer and closer to being able to achieve um those kind of goals.
One more. Oregon.
Who knows?
I think I've
It
seen
sounds
pull.
like the third party run that was supposed to screw them is now screwing us.
I mean, we're up 1 point in the polls I'm seeing.
If you buy them, and I don't.
You think
Polls
they're
are junk. They're just the polls are awful, just everywhere. They're just it's not even freaking close. Nobody knows what the electorate's going to look like. Nobody knows how to poll like 40% of the electorate. Um, it isn't working.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd be interested really to see how that race turns out. I mean, I honestly think that of the states, that are on the border, I think the ones that Democrats should be most concerned about in the long term are Wisconsin and Nevada. Like I
Mm, well, I mean,
those two,
everybody's always concerned about Wisconsin and Nevada. They've got a guaranteed majority in the state legislature, so how concerned do they really need to be?
right? I mean, like Nevada, the Democrat, it's like Nevada is like far less educated than the rest of the country, than the country as a whole. So, and Nevada and Democrats rely on working class Hispanics for their coalition, and right now they're not doing too hot with them.
Yeah, the only problem is their other base is extremely pro-choice.
Right. And so, I mean, I feel like a pro-choice Republican Party has a potential to dominate the state.
I'm not sure where you're going to find one of those.
Right. Well, I mean, they exist in New Hampshire, I guess.
Only one dude who totally screwed us on every level with his actions. So
I mean, he basically made it so that we had a shot at both seats.
it's never going to happen. It's the sort of, it's the same bullshit that led Dems to try and draw 3 seats for themselves in Arkansas.
Oh yeah, should they have basically did like I mean, what I would have done with Arkansas if I was Dems was Little Rock to the Delta.
Yeah, you literally one blue seat would have held until we destroyed it this cycle. But all they did is lose all their seats for themselves in one go. I mean, it's probably the most impressive map ever drawn by anyone.
It's the best. It is the biggest dummy mander of the 2010s, right?
Ever.
Ever.
I don't think I can cite another example of something as funny as that.
And I think
I don't think
Republicans barely changed it.
yeah, didn't have to. It was so good.
Yeah.
Literally perfect. I mean, so far as maps failing, I mean, it has to be the first.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, Republicans in Tennessee, I think, kind of made like a dummy mander themselves.
I
Um,
mean, in 10 years, if things get 10 points worse for us. Otherwise, the seats are real. I mean, you have to consider the starting point, even if a seat trends 10 points to the left, and when you're nearly losing statewide, it's on the other side. That's fine.
right. I
Um,
mean, I'm more thinking about the 2010 map, but yeah, I mean, that was, but I mean, the 2020 map, I think we were gonna have to watch that. Like,
but they're
I,
not fools. I mean, you always have to consider how the state. I mean, if we like the one seat in Ohio that luckily will have a chance to withdraw or redraw, that seat genuinely worries me. The Cincinnati seat.
yeah, no, I mean, to me,
If
like,
this was a neutral year, we would lose that seat because they are a bunch of absolute clowns. Um,
I mean, it's amazing how the legislature just literally ran out, ignored the courts, and just waited, and the court was like, "Yeah, nothing we can do."
well, but there is nothing they can do because the amendment that created this process explicitly prevents them from introducing their own map. A very good reform, personally. It's good though that we're finally getting our Supreme Court candidates out, so we
I
should
mean,
be able to win.
what's the status of the is the Ohio Supreme Court competitive this year?
Oh, very.
Oh, you think Democrats have a
Um,
chance to flip it?
I mean, they could if they have to win the Chief Justice race and something else. Well, actually, I think it's all red seats up. So if they win,
They win the Chief Justice seat. That's it.
no, it's not because they're running their existing justice. So if their person becomes the chief, then DeWine just appoints a replacement for her.
Oh wow.
So they have to win one of the normal seats. And since the race is finally partisan, that should keep the defections to a minimum.
Yep.
And since DeWine is not Sanu, he's been working hard to get them elected. And once they are, the amendment will probably almost be struck down or be, the
How?
dissent will
It's a
become the majority.
constitutional amendment, right?
But all you have to do is read the dissent to see how they'll do it.
Oh boy.
Basically, by saying they're suggestions.
Okay.
It's which is practically what you're going to see. I mean, the North Carolina Supreme Court will be ours very
Yeah,
soon as well.
that's not surprising to me. That the North Carolina Supreme Court is on the verge of flipping. It sounds like they're going to win both seats.
Easily. So, um, the 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 Dems that just the sort of suicide bombing ruling they opted for, that's not going to last 5 minutes under any court.
Wait. Why doesn't the court basically just lean in and say, Governor Cooper, you have no veto?
He doesn't have a veto.
He does now, but
Well, not with redistricting.
not with redistricting, but like on all everything else.
Good. I mean, you could basically say, the same exact logic that they use. Oh, he wasn't democratically elected, so he doesn't exist. I mean, the ruling was so, I mean, we could have Eric on for that. Just such an abominable ruling that it's gonna be such a pleasure to overturn it.
Okay. All right. I think we have to stop for now, but
Did you actually get any of your homework done?
no.
Rip.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd love to have you back on the show, Cameron.
Yeah.